initial rejection, Spider-Man went on to start the comic book and superhero renaissance, causing many other heroes to become popular as well, and leading to one of the richest and most successful franchises as well as a growing fan base. Spider-Man's creation has not only skyrocketed comic book hero popularity, but has also changed the lives of many people. However, there was a time before Spider-Man, a time where comics and superheroes held nowhere near the amount of popularity they do today. In this era of comic books, it was often seen as a nerdy thing to enjoy comic books. People were often made fun of for this. At this time, the characters in the comics were the heroes. They often didn't have a secret identity or personal problems. The heroes displayed in these comics were perfect, and in the end, it was that small detail that made them imperfect in a way. These superheroes had typically been wealthy adults, and if they weren't adults, they were part of a team. Teen heroes, as well as teens themselves, weren't always taken seriously, always being too young to be an adult but too old to be a child. Teen heroes could only ever be the sidekicks in early age of comics. To set some sort of a timeline, a lot had been going on for America and the world before, during, and even after 1962. In January of 1961, JFK was inaugurated into office as president, the Berlin Wall was built in Germany, and in April, America failed trying to invade Cuba at the Bay of Pigs. A year later, in 1962, a military council was created in South Vietnam by the United States, and the Cuban Missile Crisis started with the USSR sending weapons and arms to Cuba. It's clear that in these 2 years alone, tensions were high all across the world, in America especially. However, it only got worse in 1963 when JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and Lyndon B. Johnson took over. One day, comic writer Stan Lee was hired by Marvel Comics. This was the beginning of his career writing these comics. Now, Spider-Man wasn't created right away. He wasn't even a thought. Stan Lee began writing comics of the Fantastic Four and the Hulk. Originally, Stan Lee mostly stuck with the near-perfection standard of heroes. He kept them the way that the public was used to. Perfect. Stan Lee's comics and his writing got a good reputation and raked in a decent amount of money for the company, leading to the unavoidable question, can you make another hero?
When do you create Spider-Man?
Right after the Hulk, I think. Again, Martin said, hey, we're doing good, let's do another one, Stan.
Stan Lee got to work. After hours of brainstorming, he knew exactly what he wanted and went to his publisher.
He said, Stan, people hate spiders.
Right.
You can't do a book called Spider-Man. And he said, and you want him to be a teenager?
Right.
Teenagers can only be sidekicks.
Right.
And then he said, and you want him to have problems? Because I told him I wanted him to worry about money and pimples and all the things.
With Spider-Man rejected, Stan Lee was disappointed and almost gave up on the hero entirely. Eventually, he bit the bullet and decided to put Spider-Man in the last planned issue of Amazing Fantasy. It was in August of 1962 when tensions were so high that Spider-Man was released. Now obviously, a comic book character was unable to solve the world's problems, but they may have been able to ease some of the population's tension and inspire some young minds, and it seems Spider-Man may have been able to do just that. Months later, the figures came in. Spider-Man was a massive success. He was loved by people everywhere, marveling at the hero's heartbreaking yet beautiful story of an orphaned boy bitten by a spider, gaining incredible abilities but losing his uncle by his own reckless behavior. It was clear that the fans loved how Spider-Man's story was set up. A teenager with so many problems that sometimes he can't even get enough sleep brought people in. Teenagers who were reading these comic books and series finally had someone to relate to and see themselves in. Spider-Man inspired countless people, countless youth, helping them feel like they could become more, like they could help people.
Stan Lee says that the reason why Spidey is so popular is because all of us can relate to him, and I agree. I needed Spidey in my life when I was a kid, and he gave me hope.
This caused a ripple effect. Teens related to this solo hero and caused more flawed teenage and realistic heroes. Since Spider-Man was such a hit almost right away, he almost immediately got his own series. In 1963, less than a year later, the first issue of The Amazing Spider-Man was released. This series lasted 700 issues and 49 years until 2012 when it was replaced with the Superior Spider-Man series. In the span of 49, almost 50 years of comics, several other side series as well as a few Spider-Man team-up series including characters like Daredevil, Deadpool, and even Captain America were created. For years during the comic series run, TV series, toy lines, and even serials were created, all in the character's image. After Spider-Man's release, teen characters like Hulkling, Prodigy, and even other Spider-Man variants were created. However, despite normalizing teen heroes, none seem to be as popular as the web-slingers themselves. In 2002, a new era of Spider-Man was reached with the release of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. This movie was a massive success, becoming the highest-grossing superhero film of all time at the time of its release, gaining a trilogy the following years, ending with Spider-Man 3 in 2007. This trilogy surged Spider-Man's popularity like never before, bringing in both old and new fans excited for what was to come for the hero. In 2012, a reboot was created, and Andrew Garfield took on the role of Spider-Man in The Amazing Spider-Man. While the reveals weren't as great as Sony had hoped, they were still enough to create a sequel to the movie. This was a short-lived reboot as it only lasted 2 years before the project was scrapped in favor of an MCU Spider-Man reboot. In 2017, Spider-Man's popularity skyrocketed once again after Spider-Man was added to the MCU with Spider-Man Homecoming, starring Tom Holland, Zendaya, Michael Keaton, and Jacob Bolton. While Spider-Man moved into a new era being shown on the big screen for the first time in 2002, Spider-Man was also breaking barriers in the comics. For example, Spider-Man was the first standalone character to get a series, and later, the first to have two characters holding the mantle at the same time, with the introduction of Miles Morales in 2011. Despite being introduced in 2011, Miles' popularity didn't really kick up until 2018 with the release of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Not only was this Miles Morales' first film, but it was also a groundbreaking work of animation that permanently changed the animation game for big competitors like Disney, Pixar, and DreamWorks. Their vision, flair, and focus on animation innovation particularly stand out, said George Chrysostomou in an article on the movie's impeccable animation.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Don't wash the mouth, wash the hands.
Miles!
Be careful!
That was crazy.
Presently, Spider-Man is the most popular superhero of all time, but it's not just Peter Parker holding the title anymore. With the introduction of Miles Morales and later Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a whole new universe opened up. People can see themselves in Spider-Man. They can imagine themselves as Spider-Man and what it would be like to have those incredible abilities and be able to change the world in a positive way. It's clear that Spider-Man's influence has reached many groups of people, including the LGBTQ and neurodivergent communities, inspiring them to be proud of themselves and work towards helping others. A way Spider-Man, in particular Gwen Stacy, was able to help LGBTQ kids come out of their shell and be more open with who they are was in 2023's Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and the subtones in her big speech.
And I didn't. I can do all these things, but I can't help the people I love the most, and they can only know half of who I am. So I'm completely on my own. And now I don't even know what the right thing is anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I know I can't lose one more friend.
This scene came out in a period of time where LGBTQ+ kids may have been fearing for their safety, comforting them in a subtle way. Over the years, Spider-Man has helped teenage heroes and teens themselves be taken more seriously, inspire young kids, LGBTQ youth, and neurodivergent teens to be comfortable with who they are and fight for good, and even forced big animation companies into a new, more stylized age of animation. But none of this would have been possible without Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and all the other amazing writers and artists bringing this amazing Spider-Man to life.